very much. Okay, it's about 1 minute after 12 noon. This is the 24th of March, 1996. We're at the Seattle WholeLife Expo, and we're going to talk about probably the most remarkable medical discovery that has happened in the last 100 years. And since I'm not selling anything, you can believe what I'm going to tell you. You can build this for yourself. I'm not selling anything. First, we'll have to make a disclaimer for the sake of the Food and Drug Administration. Although everything I tell you is going to be absolutely true, we have to say that this is hypothetical, theoretical. Consult your health professional. We're not giving or implying any medical advice. We're just telling you the truth, which is a terrible thing to do in this country at this time. All material is copyrighted C 1996 by Robert C. Beck. And we do this to prevent people from misquoting me. We at least have a legal edge to stop the people that are copying the technology. In 1990, a most remarkable accident, of course there are no accidents in nature, happened. Before we go through this whole story, how many of you were not at the lecture yesterday? Holy mackerel, it's all of you. I guess I'd better start at the beginning. Well, a strange thing happened at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York City. Dr. Stephen Colley, K-A-A-L-I, had put a couple of small platinum wires in a Petri dish that contained infected human blood and a lot of HIV. He found a most amazing thing, that when he put 50 to 100 microamperes of current, that's millionths of an ampere, through this solution, something had happened to the HIV. The way he described it in his original paper that was presented in March of 1991 in Washington at the Symposium on Combination Therapies was that the HIV would no longer attach to any of the receptor sites. The outer protein layer, the reverse transcriptase layer, had been neutralized, sterilized somehow, and the HIV, although it was still alive, would simply float around in the blood and not attach, not infect any receptor site in the body. Now, I guess they were pretty excited about this. I would be too, after the $1.2 billion that had been spent on AIDS research up to this point. And they reported it. But a very funny thing happened immediately after this. The papers were not available. You'd call the college, they would shunt you aside. You would go to the journals, the papers had been cut out with razor blades. You'd go to the proceedings, you couldn't find them. Well, after 4 years, I finally did find one. I have it in my possession, so the paper exists. It wasn't just a myth. But somebody out there with a lot of influence and a lot of money was trying to suppress this information. Why? Because for 25 cents, you can cure almost any human ailment, including herpes, hepatitis, Epstein-Barr, that's chronic fatigue syndrome, AIDS, and dozens of other things that had been considered incurable up until the day that this discovery was made. Well, I am a hobbyist at heart. I've been playing with electromedicine for about 40 years. I've received a lot of awards, some of them that you may have heard of. I have not gotten the Nobel Prize, but I have gotten the Fetzer Award for pioneering work in electromedicine. That was in 1990, and a number of others. So I'm pretty well known in the field, and I thought I would tackle this problem, find out what they had done, see if it was true, and see what we can do with it to help humanity. Now, my game is give people back to themselves. Try not to deliver them into the hands of another vested interest, whether it's the IRS, the New World Order, the priesthood, the attorneys, the pharmaceutical cartels, the allopathic medicine cartels. Take back your power. In fact, a lady who's transcribing these tapes, who is our honored guest today, has spent many hours transcribing this, and the title cover that she used was Take Back Your Power. And that's what I want you to do in here, because we're going to show you how to build your own devices. You don't have to buy anything from anyone. You can build your own. And if you don't know how to build it, take the parts list, which is on page 3 of the paper that we've prepared. The device is described on page 3. The parts list is on page 4. Take it, set it on the counter at your local Radio Shack store, and say, give me one of these, and these. And if you don't know what the stuff is, take it to any 10-year-old kid on the block, and he can build it for you. We have a lot of these things that have been built. Actually, thousands of them. Whoops, we started a stampede here. I hope the papers hold out. We didn't have enough printed. When we came, we had sort of a run on them yesterday. And if you do this, it might be the best health investment you have ever made in your life. I'll tell you some of the things that happened to me when I started testing it myself. In 1910, a huge fly got in the ointment of self-help when Rockefeller Sr., bought major interests in the pharmaceutical houses in America. Well, he was smart. Cost a lot more money to buy drugs, excrete them, and go back and get some more. He hired a chap named Andrew Flexner, who was politically connected, Flexner, who with congressional and Senate support went around to the various colleges in America, Harvard, all of them that had medical schools, and said, if you continue to teach electromedicine, you will be discredited. Your licenses to teach will be pulled. Well, in those days, when you could buy a congressman as easily as you can today, it sort of set the mold for the future of medicine. At that time, 1906, 1908, there were tremendous cures for cancer. How many have heard of Bjorn Nordenstrom, the Swedish radiologist who had a cure for breast cancer? He stuck little needles, Bjorn did, in the cancer, made them positive polarity with reference to the surrounding tissue, and the cancers would usually get well. What he didn't know was that in 1906, this was standard treatment for breast cancer in all the medical textbooks. It was pretty outrageous that he'd been nominated for a Nobel Prize for doing something that had been suppressed in 1910. The reason you haven't heard about a number of these cures, the reason this cure has been obviously suppressed by the establishment, is that it works. And for 25 cents, the price, I used to carry a pack of chewing gum in my thing, hold up this Wrigley's chewing gum. I paid 60 cents for that at the John Wayne Airport in Orange County. That will cure 3 AIDS patients, totally certified, medically approved, tested cure. And who's going to sell them $20,000, the original price per year worth of AZT? It's now $5,700. DDI, all of these toxic, life-shortening chemicals, if he can cure himself for less than a third of the price of a package of chewing gum. So that's what we're all about here. We hope when you leave here, you will have taken back your power to the point where you will at least look into this. So we had about 4 major problems before we could give this to the world. The first, and obvious problem, it was unbelievable. Right? The second problem was, how do we keep people out of jail while they're curing themselves and others? We've solved that one. We found some fairly little-known federal regulations that the FDA doesn't want you to know about. We're going to read them to you. The next problem was how to keep them from dying of secondary infections. You know that AIDS has never killed anyone. It's the secondary infections, the opportunistic infections, and they're what wipe you out because your immune system has been debilitated by this HIV virus. The last problem is a little bit tricky, and I'm not sure that I have a solution, but it is very real. A lot of people on this planet, maybe 60% of them, according to one religious organization, have death wishes. They get more benefits from their secondary gains, their hidden agendas, than they do out of getting well. It goes like this. Here's a 50-year-old man that has cancer. He's at home in bed. He knows if he gets well, he's going to have to go back to work and compete with the younger engineers, and that's getting rougher every year. He knows if he gets well, the children will start screaming around him again. They won't be respectful. His wife will stop bringing him chicken soup. The neighbors will stop giving him sympathy. These are called secondary gains, and those of you who are familiar with the work of Carl and Stephanie Simonton from the 70s are aware of this. Well, this is a major agenda. In 1963, I developed a device based on Jorge Lakhovsky's work, the multiple wave oscillator, and cured a number of terminal cancer patients that were sent over to me because they were going to die from a local university, and 2/3 of them had committed suicide within 2 years once they were clean, once they had clean biopsies, because they could not deal with this world. They were playing hiding and waiting to die. What are you hiding from? Well, I don't know. I wouldn't be here unless I'd done something bad. The spaceship wouldn't have dropped me here. This is their super unconscious. They won't talk about this if they know you're listening. Or, well, why are you so guilty? Well, I was Christian, Judaic background. I'm told I was born under original sin. We were cast out of the Garden of Eden long ago, that we have to suffer. And the more we suffer, the better seat we get in heaven. They're playing queen for a day, of course. The woman who has the most problems always won the refrigerator. So these things are just built into our human nature. I don't deserve to die. I'm but a worm. You know, I don't deserve to live or have any fun. Certainly don't enjoy yourself. That's sinful. So this plays a tremendous part in the program of most people. Now, we've overcome the first 3 barriers easily. This cure works. We have the proof of it. We have PCR tests, polymerase chain reaction, described first by Carl Mullis in 1986, and on which he got the Nobel Prize a few years ago. We have people who were terminal AIDS patients, full-blown AIDS, who are now back at work, healthy, all of their symptoms are gone, but nobody wants to believe, because they've spent so many billions of dollars in the establishments looking for an answer, that you can find one easily, cheaply. We've been promoting this for about 4 years, and I won't go through it again, but how many of you in the room have seen these PCR tests? I think I showed you these this morning. 1, 2, 3, 4 or so. The reason we can't show them publicly is that this study is still underway, and we had to sign a 5-page legal document that there would be no patient disclosure until the study was published, which was supposed to have been published in November of last year, 1995. So if you're a physician or someone that'll respect the patient confidentiality, we'll show you the tests on some of the people who have volunteered to come forward that were dying of AIDS. People would have to lift them out of bed and set them on the potty. They couldn't walk. They were on life support. Their bodies were covered with Kaposi's sarcoma. These are people that are back at work today, pardon me, perfectly healthy and happy. And this is really upsetting the establishment. In fact, when our very first negative HIV test came through, the laboratory in San Leandro, California, that does dozens of these tests a month, refused to send the test back to the hospital where I'm in charge of the IRB study. Well, we've been doing these tests for a number of years. We've never seen a negative HIV once the patient had been established as having it. Well, what are you doing here? Well, we can't send you this test yet. I suspect that they were in collusion with the pharmaceutical houses. When we finally did get the tests, They had their secretaries call the secretaries at our hospital. What are you doing down there? You're claiming a cure for HIV? That's impossible. Well, it isn't. You can do it yourself. Any 10-year-old kid can do it. So these were the problems. And I guess Galileo is still excommunicated. At least his books are banned by the Catholic Church. And he was excommunicated for several hundred years. So what we're up against here is the inertia and the stupidity of the establishment that wants your money, wants to enslave you, wants to, if anything works, it's got to cost a lot of money or they're not going to touch it. They want patents on it, etc. So these are partially the problems. Now, since I covered a lot of this at the lecture yesterday, I think I'll just hit the parts of this proceeding that you haven't heard yet. In California, where I live, Santa Ana, in California, it's a felony, not a misdemeanor, but a felony to use the word cure in conjunction with something that has not been approved by the medical establishment, the Food and Drug Administration, and the powers that be. So I'll have to use the word today, spontaneous remissions, or removal of all symptoms, etc. Now, our first problem, curing these incurable diseases, did not turn out to be difficult. It took about 2 years to get the equipment optimized, the electrode placement optimized. We'll go through this in this workshop, so anyone in here can do it safely. The next problem, how to do this legally, was a little bit tricky. So we had our attorneys and friends research this, and on the bottom of page 4 of your paper, we've reprinted something that most doctors don't know about, but you will. By the way, how many health professionals do we have in the room? Doctors, chiropractors, naturopaths, nurses. All right, for the people listening to the tape, that appears to be about 15. Now, we got a really pleasant surprise for you here, because this is in the Code of Federal Regulations. This law is senior, since it's a federal law, to most of the state and county and city ordinances. So listen up. Code of Federal Regulations, Book 21, Article 807.65, Subpart D, exemptions. And this is paragraphs D and F. That's exactly where you can find it in the federal law books. Excludes and exempts from regulation. And that's you, kids. D, licensed practitioners, including physicians, dentists, and optometrists, who manufacture or otherwise alter devices solely for use in their practice. Now, that might not apply to all of you, but let's ask a very pertinent question here. How many of you have eaten in a public restaurant in the last week, say, and looked at a menu to see what the food available was and what the prices were? I now pronounce you researchers. Okay, here it comes. Fasten your seatbelts. Exempt from federal regulations are persons who manufacture, prepare, propagate, compound, or process devices solely for use in research. Isn't every day of our lives another research project? How do we survive this one, Lord? Solely for use in research, teaching, or analysis, and do not introduce such devices into commercial distribution. And this is precisely why we have published a circuit diagram for the last 4 years, that any child who can read and write the English language, who has an IQ of about 80, can build one of these for himself and use it and be totally free of Big Brother who wants your money. In my opinion, the Food and Drug Administration is the enforcement arm for the pharmaceutical houses. They want to knock out anybody that will compete with these people. So now you're free of that. The next problem, how to keep these people free of disease, opportunistic infections, which are the killers with many diseases, what kind of a medicine can we give these people during their recovery phase, which might be 2 to 5 months, that will keep them free of all disease and keep your dogs and cats and children free and not cost you anything? Well, that was very, very simple to do. How many people in the room have heard about silver colloids? Wow, that looks just about like 100% of them for you on the tape. Silver colloids were known at the turn of the century. They were extensively used before 1936. They were available in drugstores. They were very expensive. If you buy them today in the exhibition hall, and there are about 5 people in there selling silver colloids, some of them have silver colloid in the bottles. 1 or 2 of them that are the best sellers do not. We've had these analyzed at professional laboratories in California. We know which ones have colloid and don't. What if I taught you how to make your own for 1/10 of a penny per gallon? Well, if you look on the very last page of your paper on silver colloids, there's a complete description of how you can put a device together for under about $15. It simply consists of 3 9-volt transistor radio batteries that cost about $1.50 at the wholesale store, alkaline, 2 pieces of 999 fine silver wire. You put the wire in the glass of water. Before I came in, I stopped in the men's room and got a plain glass of water from the tap. Tap water is fine unless you're using it for injection. Then you should use distilled water and a little salt to make it a physiological saline solution. I'm going to show you right now, before we get to the interesting parts, what you can do with this glass of water if you know how. If you bought this glass, and there's about 8 ounces in that at the moment, off the floor, it would cost you about $90. This is our wonderful multi-level effort to save humanity. These people have been hypnotized by Ericksonian hypnosis, neuro-linguistic program, and a couple of things I can't talk about, to be very enthusiastic, claim ours is the best, nobody else is any good. You've got to buy it from us. All the other guys are fakes. What we did is we bought bottles of maybe 20 different manufacturers, sent them to a laboratory in Anaheim that specializes in silver analysis for the photographic trade. Before they can pour their hypo solutions and developers down the drain, they have to certify that they don't have certain heavy metals. So let's do something interesting. This is a little laser pointer. Make a circle around the air conditioner there. That is sold in most electronic stores for people who do slide lectures, and they can point to the screen, say that's what we're talking about. They're about $30. And I haven't looked at the Seattle water lately, but I'll not let this hit your eyes, but if you look at the beam that's going through the liquid in the glass, you'll see that it's fairly clear, fairly clean. There's a lot of junk in there floating around, but there usually is an unfiltered and undistilled water. So let's start with this water, which at the current rates is maybe a fraction of a penny. Let's put these 2 little lengths of gauge 14 pure silver wire. Do not buy the wire if you plan on building one of these for yourself. Do not buy it from a jewelry store. They do not sell silver wire. They sell sterling silver. The silver wire is too soft, too fragile to make jewelry out of, so they add 18% nickel, which is a toxic heavy metal, and sell that for silver. You don't want any nickel in your system, you want silver. So buy your wire from a foundry. This is about $5 worth of pure silver wire wholesale. That's the mint price. The like gold is $3.80 an ounce. This is $4.75 an ounce, etc. Now let's plug it into this little box, which incidentally is made by a dear friend of ours. It's the only ethical box that I know of on the market, and no, I don't own any part of his company. We're just recommending it because he's making the best. And you can see these down at booth 1000. Turn on the switch. Don't pull the wires out of the water, and leave this for about 3 minutes. Then I'll show you what we have in the glass that was water. By the way, the cost of this for the silver and the battery life is about 1/10 of a penny per gallon. The water alone is 800 times more expensive than the silver colloid. If you buy a gallon of distilled water at the supermarket in Southern California, it runs about 80 cents. You multiply that by 1/10 of a penny, the water alone cost 800 times more than the silver colloid that you're going to make, and we're going to turn that glass of 1/10 of a penny's worth of water into something that's worth about $90 if you buy it in a bottle over at the exhibit hall. And when you ingest that water, you will very likely never have another common cold. You will never have another virus. You will probably never have pneumonia or the flu. And if you're vaccinated with animal tissue, usually monkey kidney, for the flu, you're going to have all kind of other problems and probably get the flu anyway. And if you have cats and dogs that are going to the veterinarians regularly, as many of my friends had, one of my friends had a thoroughbred Persian, and she'd take it to the vet about every 3 months with pus running out of its little ears and eyes and nose. Thoroughbred cats were so inbred that they were rather fragile. The cat is about 13 or 14 years old, and she met me at breakfast one morning. "Bob, what have you done to my cat?" I thought, uh-oh, here we go practicing medicine without a license again. She said, "My cat is acting like it's a kitten. It's running and jumping all over the furniture, and he never got 4 feet off the floor before last week. He's acting young again, he's frisky, and a terrible thing has happened. If I don't put a teaspoon or 2 of colloid in his drinking water, he won't touch it." I think that cat is psychic and knows something that we don't, that this is really good for him. Okay, this water is very high resistance, low conductance, so we're going to leave it in a couple of extra minutes. Then I'm going to show you how you test for the presence of colloids with a laser. The process I'm going to use to physicists. Any engineers or physicists in here? Hi, Mike. Hello. You're kind of pretty to be a physicist. Was your hand up? Oh, no, it was somebody else. Anyway, this is called the Tyndall effect, Tyndall, or the Rayleigh, capital Rayleigh. These were physicists who discovered the backscatter phenomena. These particles of silver in this glass are going to be about 0.001 micron to 0.015 in diameter. That's about as fine as it gets. This is as good a colloid as money can buy, in spite of what the multi-level people will tell you. Well, yours isn't yellow, yours isn't this, yours isn't that. The reason theirs is yellow is they put dye in it to make it look golden, most of them. You can find that on analysis if you choose to spend the $50 at a lab, as we have over and over. Let's see what we've got here. We're going to take this magical athame, which I think I stole at McDonald's restaurant. Raphael Gabriel. Well, now that it's blessed, we're going to stir it up. Now! Oh, yum yum. Don't worry, this won't get near your eyes. This time, look at the beam coming through this glass of ordinary tap water. We have nothing up our sleeves. You notice? To your health. We've made a sacred sacrament here. No, you can't overdose on it. You can overdose on silver proteins. If you see protein on that bottle, don't buy it. It can stain your skin gray. It has a lot of other side effects. So now we've solved three of the major problems. Believability, we now have massive quantities of lab tests on people who did have HIV and they do not have it today. Legality, we just read you from the books, the Code of Federal Regulations. How do we keep them uninfected while they're recovering? We've just shown you how to do it for yourselves. Take back your power and do these things and start getting better instead of sicker and sicker every year, like many of my friends who are selling marvelous multi-level products, miraculous pycnogenol DHEA, which has no DHE in it. It's usually a yam root. If I ask for a gold coin, I don't want somebody to give me a pile of dirt and say, well, we got $32 a ton worth of gold in there, now you refine it and mint the coin. The DHEA yam root is a precursor, but not the product you want to put in your body. I can go ahead knocking things all day because I'm like a crusader rabbit. Yes? About every 2 months, we recommend using acidophilus or some of the salivarius things to replant that. But it hasn't bothered me. I haven't taken any of that. And I've been drinking about half a gallon of this a day. And I'm healthier than I've ever been. And don't let people tell you you can get too much of it. They try to tell you that to make you think a teaspoon's going to handle your problem. It won't. You may as well make your own children. It's so cheap and so quick and so dirty. A lot of people come around to the restaurant where I eat breakfast. We take the water, make colloid, fill up their little prune juice bottles, and they go home for a month and don't bother me again until they're out of it. The next problem is the human death wish, and this goes into pretty detailed psychological, parapsychological, and metaphysical solutions. Involves EMDR and little NLP and what have you, but we can usually turn them around, and at which time they stop playing Defeat the Healer. Oh, I've got a condition, I'm getting sympathy, I'm getting benefits, the lunch wagon's coming around, my friends are sorry for me, and I'm a hero, I'm suffering, I'm a martyr. You can get rid of all of that in a couple of hours if you are a good psychologist and use stuff that you were not taught in school. If you were taught in school how to do it, you're probably not working. That's why we don't have a lot of... We have enough rat psychologists graduated from UCLA every year to cure all the rats in India, Ceylon, and China. Well, I like to do things for myself. Now, to be perfectly ethical in this presentation, which I'm trying to do, we're going to have to tell you now what not to do. And if you thought I was a good guy this morning, you're going to hate my guts when we get to Article 5 here, because I'm going to tell you some things you might not agree with. But I have the curse on my head of Apollonius of Tyana. If you're familiar with the history, the mythology of Apollonius, he was cursed by the gods with the directive that he was, if anyone asked him a question, he had to tell the truth. And a man who would tell the truth needs a very fast horse. So what you're going to hear here, whether you like it or not, is the truth. On page 5 of your paper, we have precautions. These are the no-nos. Do not use wrist-to-wrist. We don't use that anymore now. These are electrode placements, which we'll go into later. with anyone using a cardiac pacemaker. Any applied electrical signals may interfere with the demand-type heart pacers and cause malfunction. And then the standard caveats: do not use on pregnant women while driving or using hazardous machinery. We put that in just to avoid liability. Now, four weeks ago, I was invited to lecture at the ABSCAM conference, AASBM, in Honolulu. That's the American Academy of Acupuncture and Bioenergetic Medicine. And I thought that these people would be receptive to an idea that would enable them to cure about 99% of their patients. But they were furious with me because we read this article. So brace yourselves if you're into New Age medicine. Users must, this is imperative, must avoid ingesting anything containing medicinal herbs, teas, foreign or domestic, or potentially toxic medication, nicotine, alcohol, recreational drugs, laxatives, tonics, and certain vitamins for several days before starting this blood cleaning process, because blood electrification can cause electroporation, which makes cell membranes pervious to small quantities of normally harmless chemicals in plasma. The effect is the same as extreme overdosing, which may be lethal. And the article cited here is, quote, Electroporation, a General Phenomenon for Manipulating Cells and Tissues, by J.C. Weaver, Journal of Cellular Biochemistry, Book 51, page 426 to 435, 1993. Effects can mimic increasing doses many-fold. Both the magnetic pulsar, which we'll describe later, and the blood purifier cause electroporation. That means when you put any phase-reversing current, biphasic current, through the blood, and both the magnetic pulsar and the blood cleaner that I've shown you do this, any substance, medically prescription, particularly herbs, particularly garlic, which is a deadly poison, that you have in your blood at the time, will go directly into some of the cells and become toxic. Look at it this way. We have 2 aspirin. Take 2 aspirin, call me in the morning. You take them, 99% of the people won't have any problem. If you multiply that by 30 and take 60 aspirin at the same time, you can be in deep trouble. A friend of mine who usually stops at a bar and has a pitcher of beer on the way home before he plops on the couch and watches sports, had 1 beer, decided to wire up, got in his car, drove about a half a block, had to pull into the nearest parking lot and sleep for a couple of hours. He's so drunk he couldn't steer the car because he'd wired the blood cleaner to his wrist before he went home. The electroporation had opened the pores of the cells and let the stuff go right in. Now, I really shouldn't tell you this because a friend of mine in Colorado had some very bad marijuana that he was thinking of dumping out, but then he thought, well, there's going to be a dry spell someday. He didn't. Wired up, had nothing to do, decided to take a couple of puffs. He said, my God, it was like LSD in 1968. I was gone for 2.5 hours. Other people have taken very small amounts of medicinal herbs and been critically ill. So we have to warn you that the only bad or side effect of this technology that I know of, plus defeating people's death wishes, is caused by electroporation. We suggest you look up this paper and read it if you are a health professional. So avoiding these things, you have nothing to fear. Now we're going to get really unpopular. Well, these are obvious. Do not place electrode pads over skin lesions, abrasions, new scars, cuts, eruptions, or sunburn. And then, of course, do not advance the amplitude to uncomfortable levels All subjects will vary. Do not fall asleep while using. The magnetic pulsar should be safe, on the other hand, to use anywhere on the body or the head. Avoid ingesting alcohol 24 hours before using. Drink an 8-ounce glass of distilled water 15 minutes before and immediately following each session. And drink at least 4 additional glasses daily for flushing during the neutralization and for a week thereafter. This is imperative. You're going to have literally billions of bugs, microbes, pathogens, viruses, some fungi, some parasites floating around in your body because we haven't poked a hole in you and let any blood out. They've got to come out somewhere. This is usually the kidneys, the liver, the skin, etc. You have to flush these toxins out as you go along, or you're going to get very sick on your own waste products. In the studies, the things we've noticed in detoxification, if they have a heavy viral load, we've taken HIV patients in that have up to 3 million active HIV in the beginning per milliliter, per cubic centimeter of blood. And what happens when these things are your body tries to throw them off? You'll get skin rashes, particularly on your legs. You'll get little carbuncles and boils. You'll have a yellowish, sticky exudate coming out of your feet and legs, usually the lower extremities. And this is dead bugs. They got to go somewhere. They come out the stool, out the urine, out the skin. Your skin is considered a second set of liver function. And they got to go somewhere. So don't overload them with it. In fact, you might want to back off. If you're doing 2 hours a day, which is what we're presently recommending, you might want to cut back for a day or two to like 20 minutes and then pick up later. The only discomfort that we've ever had were detoxification and electroporation. You can expect that. That's good. The person complains. You say, well, would you rather have all those dead bugs still in your body? Wouldn't it be better if they were out? Oh, yeah, that's all right. Well, you might want to do colonics. You might want to do a bath with salt and soda and ginger and the things that are usually used for skin detoxing. It all depends on the subject. Some people have experienced no discomfort. If the subject should ever feel sluggish, faint, dizzy, headachy, nauseous, bloated, or has flu-like symptoms after exposure, simply reduce the number of pulses from the magnetic pulsar per session and or shorten the applications of the blood cleaning and drink more water. Use extreme caution when treating patients with impaired liver or kidney function. Obviously, the body is not able to throw these toxins off. This condition medically is known as Herxheimer's syndrome and was very common in the early days of antibiotics. Antibiotics, incidentally, penicillin, which was the classic, will only handle about 8 different staph, strep, etc., bacteria and microbes. And the colloid you're making handles 650. So that means that this colloid is about 75 cents more potent than penicillin, Cipro, ampicillin, or anything else. And why haven't you heard about it except at health fairs? It's too cheap, and it's not patentable. It's pre-1936 FDA regulations. But babies, you can make your own. And you're going to just get better and better as time goes on, yes?
You mentioned the 650. Is there any study that you can find in printed form that shows this?
Of course. The medical literature is full of it, and these studies are thoroughly covered if you've got the papers and the papers on colloids. All you have to do is read them. You can believe them. They've been verified. This work has been done over and over for the last 90 years and is just given. You put a drop of colloid on a culture plate, and its little circle of purity will all be 7/8 of an inch in diameter. You put a drop of penicillin on there, it might be 1/4 of an inch. It's that much more effective, and it works in 6 to 8 minutes as soon as it gets to the site of the infection. This is proven. It's there. Now,
and does it penetrate the blood-brain barrier to get into the central nervous system?
I don't know. I suspect that some of the 001 micron particles can do that. But the reason garlic is so toxic, the sulfone, S-U-L-F-O-N-E, hydroxyl ion does penetrate the blood-brain barrier, just like DMSO, and is a specific poison for higher life forms and brain cells. We discovered this much to our horror when I was the world's largest manufacturer of ethical EEG biofeedback equipment. We'd have people come back from lunch that looked clinically dead on an encephalograph, which we used to calibrate their progress. Well, what happened? Well, I went to an Italian restaurant. There was some garlic in my salad dressing. So we had them sign things that they wouldn't touch garlic before classes, or were wasting their time, their money, and my time. I guess those of you who are pilots or have been in flight test, I was in flight test engineering in Doc Howland's group in the 50s. The flight surgeon would come around every month and remind all of us, don't you dare touch any garlic 72 hours before you fly one of our airplanes, because it'll double or triple your reaction time. You're 3 times slower than you would be if you had had a few drops of garlic. Well, we didn't know why. For 20 years later, until I owned the Alphametrics Corporation, we were building biofeedback equipment and found out that garlic totally desynchronizes your brain waves. So I funded a study at Stanford. And sure enough, they found that it's a poison. You can rub a clove of garlic on your foot, on the sole of your foot, and you can smell it shortly later on your wrist. So it penetrates the body. This is why DMSO smells a lot like garlic. That sulfone hydroxyl ion penetrates all the barriers, including the corpus callosum in the brain. Any of you who are organic gardeners know that if you don't want to use DDT, the garlic will kill anything in the way of insects. Now, most people have heard most of their lives that garlic is good for you, and we put those people in the same class of ignorance as the mothers who at the turn of the century would buy morphine sulfate in the drugstore and give it to their babies to put them to sleep. And after the Harrison Act, that was outlawed. Someday garlic will be outlawed. When you see what it actually does to your body, I know some of you don't believe me. Some of you are vegetarians and you think garlic is good for you. Just know that no ashram in India will permit garlic on the premises because they know how stupid it makes the people. Even the Church of Scientology, heaven forbid, would keelhaul anybody who brought any garlic or any garlic salt or any salad dressing with garlic onto the ships, the Diana, the Apollo. And garlic is strictly forbidden in many of the places of higher learning. Now, you don't want to hear this, but it is true. You'll find that this is absolutely a fact. If you have any patients who have low-grade headaches or attention deficit, they can't quite focus on the computer in the afternoon, just do an experiment. You owe it to yourselves. Take those people off of garlic and see how much better they get very, very shortly. And then let them eat a little garlic after about 3 weeks. They'll say, my God, I had no idea that this was the cause of our problems. And this includes the deskunked garlics, kyolic, some of the other products. Very unpopular, but I got to tell you the truth, like Apollonius. And here's the worst one of all. Health professionals. Avoid nicotine addicts, vegetarians, and other unconsciously motivated death wishers and their covert agendas of defeat the healer. Tobacco, the most addictive substance known by the Sorensen-Krover tests at the VA Sepulveda in 1974, they found that nicotine was 4 1/2 times more physically addictive than heroin. And the tobacco companies have been fighting this study ever since, but it's true. And when Congress gets a hold of this, it'll be the end of unregulated substances that should be controlled. Great Britain, I guess all of you saw the headlines 2.5 years ago. They're under socialized medicine. They will not give bypass surgery to people who smoke because they found that the surgery does not last Within a year or two, they're going to need more bypass, and the state, the taxpayers over there, fund that, so they just quit giving bypass surgery to nicotine users. The smokers don't want to hear this, but it has wrecked their circulatory system. Like Wallach says, well, we won't go into that. Health professionals avoid nicotine addicts, vegetarians, etc. True vegetarian diets are missing essential amino acids absolutely necessary for the successful rebuilding of AIDS-ravaged tissues. Now, if you have cancer, we highly recommend that you become a vegetarian for one simple reason. The acid waste products of the cancer cells are badly affected by the acid wastes of red meats. In that case, we highly recommend that you stay a vegetarian. But if you want to rebuild damaged tissue in your body, an AIDS-ravaged, anyone seen a terminal AIDS patient? They're so frail, they can hardly walk, they're being pushed around in wheelchairs. How are you going to rebuild that tissue, that muscle, that cartilage, that fascia, when you don't put the right fuel in? I remember during the war, I had a little 1934 Pontiac, and we had an A card, which was about 2 gallons a week, and I had to get to school. So all of us were putting kerosene and mothballs and naphtha into the gas tank, trying to extend the little bit of gasoline we had. And we'd get to school, knocking and puffing and smoking. But after a short time, we burned out the engines. And I was gratified to find a study recently where they studied children of Seventh-day Adventists who had been sent to a Seventh-day Adventist school. They found that there had been irreparable orthopedic damage to their cells because of this lack of amino acids. We see a lot of you. How many of you have seen that study? You were nodding. Okay. And this came as quite a shock to this religious outfit that thought it was purer, more holy to be vegetarians, and it might be. But if you're dealing with patients who are trying to recover from a devastating, life-threatening disease, don't waste your time if they're vegetarians. This is just a matter of economy. If you're a farmer and have so much water allocated for your farm, are you going to put that on the weeds or on the crops? I hate to put it that bluntly, that this technology is brand new, and a lot of people think that vegetarianism is holy. Well, fine. I don't want to interfere with your religion. I'm just telling you that we have not let vegetarians on some of our IRB, Investigational Review Board, studies because we know we're wasting our time. Now, vegetarians just hate me for this. They want to take me to task. They say, show me the references where there are not the complete essential amino acids in vegetables. Well, I can do that. It's been in the medical literature for years. And if you're going to run your body, why don't you fuel it properly, at least until you're out of some devastating, life-threatening disease? And if you buy several $100s worth of amino acids a month and supplement your diet, you'll be okay. In the meantime, eat the things that your body was intended to eat. And I'll argue that point with you also. Well, anyway, I'm telling you how to stay out of trouble if you want to be on the pioneering forefront of curing people of things which were impossible to cure before 1990 when Kali made his discovery. And then we go into recovery guilt, which is part of the death wish. Those are the things not to do. Now, the final problem in this triumvirate is that when you have gotten all of the HIV out of the blood, as we have massive evidence and proof of, there is still going to be HIV in the lymph tissue, in certain stomach muscles, and in other organs of the body. And in these sites, S-I-T-E-S, the HIV can live for 5 to 14 years. This is not my figure, it's Los Alamos, the biological investigators there. If we don't want this person to reinfect himself within about 5 years and start the cycle all over, by the way, this latency period was one of the biggest mysteries in the HIV puzzle. Why is it that they became infected in 1983 and it didn't have an outburst until 1990, for example? Because if you biopsy certain lymph nodes, certain other tissue in the body, you will find the latent germinating HIV still in these cells, where eventually something in your life cycle happens to cause budding, B-U-D-D-I-N-G. These get back into your body and you infect yourself all over. Now, how are we going to get some of these cells out of the body? You have dozens and dozens of lymph nodes. If you look on page 8 of your paper, we took these from an 1894 issue of Gray's Anatomy. You will see the principal lymph sites. If we take the upper left-hand picture alone here, you will find perhaps 50 of these little lymph nodules, which are the white areas in the drawing, between the shoulder and the back of the neck. Now, are we going to take little needles, pairs of needles, and stick electrodes into each one of these sites and give it a certain shot of electricity for a few minutes and go on? That's going to be terribly difficult, terribly painful, and terribly time-consuming. How do we get all of this at one shot and do it safely, non-invasively, and in a way that doesn't cause complications? So we had to work this out so that it was inexpensive, accessible, non-invasive, in vivo. That means in the body, not cut the lymph node out, put it on the table, treat it, and put it back. That's ridiculous. So I developed a little thing here that'll cost you $14 if you build your own, about $50 if you buy all the stuff new. It consists of a Vivitar, V-I-V-I-T-A-R brand electronic flash unit, a strobe light. This goes on your cameras and takes the pictures instead of using flash bulbs. By the way, I invented this in 1946, and if you go to the patent office, you'll find that Harold E. Edgerton at MIT had made a big one that was high voltage, weighed about 200 pounds, rolled around on roller skates. And World War II was still going then, when I started this work in 1945. So I had to invent something to feed my hobby, which was photography. I was the school photographer at USC, and so I invented a light bulb that would last forever. And you can go to the patent office and look that up. Under Robert C. Beck, you'll find my name on all the basic patents. So I was very familiar with pulse technology. We wound a coil consisting of 130 turns of number 16 or number 14 wire. We put this coil in series with the flash tube because for $19 retail, $2 or $3 yard sale swap meet price, you've got a device that will store a tremendous amount of energy by charging up a capacitor, dumping the joules, J-O-U-L-E-S, or watt-seconds of energy in this capacitor through the coil, and developing a tremendous magnetic field. This magnetic field you can measure on a ballistic magnetometer at a minimum of 10,000 Gauss, 10 kilogauss, a maximum, depending on your strobe, of about 19,000 Gauss. And what happens when you have a time-varying magnetic pulse or field and hold it near any conductor? And skin and tissue and blood and lymph and stomach muscles are conductors, because if you're not a mummy, if you haven't been dehydrated and wrapped, you have a lot of salt water. Your body is 80% by weight of salt water, some people more. The salt water is a very good conductor. So if we hold a time-varying magnetic field close to any conductor, you induce a back EMF, electromotive force. This is called Lenz's law, L-E-N-Z, capital L-E-N-Z, who was a physicist who described magnetic interactions. This is exactly the way that the alternator in your car, a generator, magneto, this is the way that all the electromechanical, or rather the magnetic devices, induction motors, work. Now what does that do? What is happening, the magnetic field is moving the voice coil in this dynamic microphone, and that will translate as sound. If we hold this over our lymph, according to the map on page 8, over the thymus, the lymph up and down your neck, you can generate enough of a magnetic time-varying pulse to induce about 2 milliamperes measured of current through these tissues that still have AIDS germinating away. And what have we done? We've met the criteria of 50 to 100 microamperes of power in these organs without sticking needles in them and running current through the needles. We've done this in vivo again, gently, non-invasively, painlessly. You won't feel, you won't hear a thing. The energy coming out of this coil is occult, O-C-C-U-L-T. And if you go to your Webster's dictionary, the original meaning of occult was hidden, like occluded blood, etc. And only in the last 100 years have people linked it with metaphysics, witchcraft, mysterious things that go bump in the night. So this occult force is very, very powerful. I'm going to make a demonstration here. I tied a string to this 1-inch diameter steel washer. This is called a fender washer. If you want to buy one, they come in little plastic packs at the hardware store. And since I need 3 hands for this, I'm going to sound funny for you on the tape because I'm holding the anchor in my teeth while I push the button. And we're going to dump this magnetic energy of this coil into the vicinity of this washer, and I'm going to do it when I count 3. Watch. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Going to do it once more. 1, 2, 3. In free space, this will kick the washer about 14 inches into the air, about this far. That proves that some kind of mysterious energy around this coil is now going into your body, and that energy, the time-varying magnetic flux, is what induces enough current in these organs to get rid of the residual so you will not reinfect yourself in about 5 years.
Is this the case with bacteria and viruses other than...
Oh, yes. Strangely enough, all of the... we'll show you a patent in a couple of minutes, which will really surprise the engineers here. MIT, Harvard has one of these 14 patents. Dr. Colley has one of the 14. Albert Einstein College in New York ran to the patent office with this information, and I'll read it to you directly out of a legal document that'll tell you that all bacteria, viruses, fungi, microbes, parasites are very sensitive to electrical changes. All of these are anaerobic. They cannot live in the presence of oxygen, which is why so much hope was placed on oxygen therapies like ozone, H2O2. Many of you are familiar with the oxygen therapies. You've read Ed McCabe's book, Oxygen Therapies. Ed is a good man. He does tremendously good work. He too has gotten himself in trouble by telling the truth. Okay. Now, to get to your point, which was very interesting, very pertinent, and very important, I love a mystery. I'm completely seduced by UFO landings, strange phenomena, free energy motors, things that run without visible energy forms. And I tried tracking them down. I chase these things. I have since I was an adolescent. When I started chasing down this technology that had been cut out of the journals and proceedings, I was amazed at how well they had covered the tracks. If you call Colley at Albert Einstein College in New York City, try to get through to him, you're not going to. If you do get through to him, he might tell you something, oh no, we're not interested in that, we're not doing that anymore. That was just a report that came out in the media in 1991, March of 1991, etc. But if we go to the government records and documents, we find something very interesting. This turned up as a result of a patent search on this technology. When I get involved in a topic, I go crazy. I do computer searches, networking, literature searches. I spend time in medical libraries. Where I live, it's the University of California, UCLA. They have a good biomed library, 7 stories of it there. And you'll find something very, very interesting. This legal document actually got into public literature in the patent office. I'm reading, for those of you, these numbers are in your paper. You don't have to write them down. U.S. patent number 5188738, date of issue February 23rd, 1993. Inventor Stephen Colley, Ferry Dobbs, Peter M. Schwarsky, etc. And the cat's out of the bag. I'm reading from a document which is accepted in any court of law. Once it's been issued, they assume the patent examiners have done their job. Incidentally, the patent examiners for this technology required massive documentation before they would issue this patent, because this is so revolutionary, so much against the mindset of the American public, like those poor people that still think garlic is good for you. And here's what it says in column 1. Because of this problem, the present invention has been devised. The current problem was that for 14 years they've spent $500,000 worth of money trying to find a cure for AIDS, with absolutely very little success. All they have done is attenuate the HIV virus with combination therapies, namely AZT, DDI, etc., but they haven't cured anyone. They haven't got a negative PCR like I have. That's the problem. Because of this problem, the present invention has been devised to attenuate any bacteria, virus, including AIDS, HIV virus, parasites, and or fungus contained in blood. And these are rendered ineffective for infecting a normally healthy human cell. And then here in column 2 on line 9, it starts out that bacteria, virus, fungus, and our parasites contained in the blood or other bodily fluids are rendered ineffective to infect and or affect normally healthy human cells. And they really let the cat out of the bag when we get over into the claims section. And I hope I marked this up so I can find it again. All right, we're on column 7, line 12. For example, treatments of virus in media at 100 microamps for 3 minutes has been observed to substantially attenuate, render ineffective the AIDS virus. Similar treatment of other field strength values and lengths of time will have a similar attenuating effect on bacteria, virus, parasites, and or fungus which are present in blood or other bodily fluids being treated. And any undesirable contaminants, such as virus, bacteria, fungus, and or parasites, will be adequately attenuated to the point that they are rendered ineffective by sustained action of electric current flowing as the blood travels from the hypodermic needle to the storage bag or vice versa. And they're saying time periods on the order of from 1 to 6 minutes at least. But wait a minute. Are they going to give us this on a silver platter? They going to let the cat out of the bag? They got to put a whammy in this patent. Let me show you what it is, and it's going to blow your minds like it did mine when I finally got my hands on all of this material that is legally documented. If we look at Figure 1, which in the convention of the U.S. Department of Commerce, Department of Patents, it usually has the general case solution to the invention. This describes what they have done that seems to be original. And if you look very carefully, you will see a human forearm. You'll see a little pipe, which is 22 inches long, a plastic pipe, that has a hypodermic needle on one end. In other words, you have to go to a hospital situation where, under the prescription of an MD, a registered nurse, IV, intravenous nurse, does the sticking. They put the hypodermic needle in one end of this pipe, tube, hose, in one arm. They run the blood through this pipe past a couple of little electrodes, which are 2 centimeters apart. That's slightly less than an inch. An inch is 2.5 centimeters. Then they run the blood into a container where it is then safe for transfusions. Thousands of people, hemophiliacs, surgical subjects have been infected with HIV, particularly in France, where the blood is still contaminated to this day. And this is a way to make the blood AIDS-free for storage. They can't throw out these thousands of gallons of plasma in the Red Cross. I've talked to Priscilla as well anyway. Or the other end, the other needle, under pressure, a little peristaltic pump, forces it back into the other arm. This is a process like dialysis. You sit there for about 4 hours a day. Very expensive, $22,000 to $30,000 is one professional estimate. So they've still got you, baby. It's going to cost you a lot of money to cure yourself. They've got you. They're going to take your blood out in vitro, V-I-T-R-O, treat it electrically, put it back into the other arm, and charge you an arm and a leg. And then they'll have the problem of using new apparatus next time. How are they going to disinfect this? They're not. They're going to sell you a new tube. That's how they've hung on to the profits. Isn't it a far better thing we do to treat the blood in the body where it belongs, not poke holes in the sufferer, and do it for 25 cents? I like that one a lot better. So that's what we've done. Now let me show you exactly how. In the beginning, 1991, when I got involved in this, our preferred site, S-I-T-E, was foot to foot with the electrodes. The thought there is that you've got about half of the total volume of blood in the body below the waist. You have actually about 6/5 and about 4/5 above the waist. And that we've got more circulation in the legs if you do not have circulatory deficiency like in diabetes. We're going leg to leg. Well, we did this for a long time, and we got stunning results, but it was inconvenient. Our next approach was to go wrist to wrist, and this was the best protocol that we had developed up until about December of last year. And then when we looked at the blood maps from Gray's Anatomy, I'm a physicist, I'm not a doctor, a physiologist, anatomical expert. If you'll please look at page 7 of your paper and look at the bottom 2 drawings, you will find the median ulnar artery, not vein, very accessible at the pulse point, where you feel your pulse, where the doctor feels your pulse. The brachial branch comes down the other side of the arm. Here's a map of the blood vessel. It goes up here to the joint in your elbow, comes back down to the other side. So we thought, well, what if we place both electrodes on one wrist? This will make it a lot easier to drive, eat, work the computer. So since December of last year, all of our IRB protocols with all the hospitals that I work with are suggesting that we use these points only. These points will embrace about 50 cubic centimeters of blood at any moment in time, instead of this marvelous patent, which does about 2 cubic centimeters over a 1 inch. We now have about a 37 or 38 inch path. And the way the patent shows it, it's going to cost you 6 months and $30,000. The way we're doing it now, it's going to take 3 weeks and cost you 25 cents. So here's what we do. We take a couple of short lengths of 3 32nd inch diameter by 1 1/8 inch long stainless steel rod. We buy a welding rod at Cameron Welding Supply in Southern California. We cut it up into 1 inch pieces. We got about 30 of these electrode blanks for 80 cents. They're going to cost you about 2.5 cents each. Don't forget, we have to be able to afford this, and if we're taking back our power and we're giving you back to yourself, we don't want to spend any money, do we? They've been taking money from us all of our lives. Take back your power. We wrap these little electrodes with cotton flannel. It must be cotton. Cotton is hygroscopic, H-Y-G-R-O, scopic. That means that the fabric itself will hold the moisture inside of itself. That means that we're going to get better conduction. What would happen if we used nylon, polyester, etc., etc.? The moisture will stay on the outside of the fabrics, outside of the strands of the fabric, and will not penetrate it, so we don't get as good conductance. What we're trying to do here is to get the maximum current into the blood, the minimum current wasted in the tissue around it. There are 7 layers of healthy tissue between the outside world here and the blood that's going in your veins and arteries. It starts with the squamous epithelial, has the superficial fasciolata, it has the subcutaneous sebaceous, it has the walls of the blood vessels. There are 7 layers that we want to get through to get that current inside, so we don't have to take the blood out of the body, run a risk of infection, coagulation, clotting, fibrinogen reaction, crenation, all of these things that happen to blood when you take it out of the body. So, we dip these little cotton-covered electrodes in a bottle that has salt water in it. You make this salt water out of sea salt. We don't like to use table salt because that too has contaminants. It has iodine, it has aluminum, it has silica. The reason for the aluminum and the silica that can cause Alzheimer's in your table salt is, as Morton's said, the little girl with an umbrella, when it rains it pours. And without these desiccators, your salt would cake in high humidity, rainy weather. It's full of iodine because our big brother, who's trying to put fluoride in our water, says that, well, if we don't give them iodine in their salt, they're going to get goiter. They'll have thyroid problem. Big brother, in looking after us, has given us more poisons. Oh, I don't know how you feel about this fluoride thing. I think it's a mess. That is rat poison. So we take a little piece of stretch fabric here that's 8 inches long. We sew a 1.5 inch length of Velcro, mating Velcro, fuzzy on one side, hooks on the other, so that we make a little wrist strap here. Show you how simple this is. I've done it in 5 seconds instead of getting stuck by an intravenous nurse. That's there. These are soaking wet. We feel with our finger exactly where the pulse is. We take a Sharpie type ink pen and put 3 little dots precisely on where that pulse is. Not 1/10 of a millimeter off that pulse. Why? We're trying to get the electricity into the blood where it's going to kill the boogers, not into the surrounding 7 layers of stuff. We do the same thing. Oh, I'm pounding away here. I'm still alive. On each side of the wrist. We plug this 3.5 millimeter jack. We've all standardized on this so that you can use things interchangeably. Turn it on. You can see the little light flashing before you turn it, before you plug the plug in. And if it's going red, green, this is a safety feature that proves that it is changing polarity, that we're not putting DC into the blood, which can cause a lot of trouble, called electrolysis, ion migration. Well, a number of things can go wrong. All of the dangers have been taken out of this design. Incidentally, the best unit made in America today or anywhere is available right here in booth 1000. As you go into the exhibition hall, turn right, go down to the end and look at them. I do not own this company. I do not own any stock in it. I have never received a nickel from this company. I'm recommending it because these work. He has quality control in place now. We recommend that if you're too lazy, too stupid, too busy, too indolent, too forgetful to make one of these yourself, and that means about half of us in this room, including me, are lazy and stupid. Well, I'm not electronically impaired. I've been working with it since I was 8 years old. You can buy one that's better than I could have made 2 years ago. This is a proprietary design. We haven't, Mike hasn't published a schematic on it, but I thoroughly recommend it. You'll save a lot of time and money, and every day of your life that you're not healthy is another day that you're not having any fun. You wear this for about 2 hours a day for 21 days. This is all in your paper. And our latest revision, the biological research team at Los Alamos, New Mexico, recently plotted the lifespan of the HIV virus and found something that had never been suspected. This made headlines in the science section of the Los Angeles Times on March the 16th of this year, just last week. The half-life of, well, not the half-life, the total life of an HIV virus from the time that it buds inside of a white cell, makes its RNA replication. These buds burst out through the white cell, billions of them, to take on a life of their own, is exactly 1.2 days. So if you go 1.5 days, 36 hours, you will have gotten the life cycle of all the juvenile, budding, fractionated, mature adult cells. You've caught them on their whole life cycle from the day they're born till the day they die of old age. So if we do this for 2 days, it's safe to do this now because all of your detoxing has presumably happened in the first 21 days. You're not weeping eczema. One of the chaps who was really, he had 3,400,000 HIV per milliliter. He's the one I mentioned. When he started this, during the 21 days, he got little lumps under his scalp that were kind of mushy, very soft. And he thought, my God, what's happening here? Till one day, one of them burst, and this yellowish, greenish pus was running down his face. So we suggested he take a bath towel, hand towel, wrap it around his head. We called him Vesuvius, the volcano, because this pus ran down his face it was caught by the towel after he used one, for about 2 days. And he said, my God, I feel wonderful. I haven't felt this well since I got AIDS, and I've been living with it for about 10 years. I'm not dead yet. He came back to life because this had detoxed him. So now, we say that after this 3 weeks, you're likely to be detoxed, and then it's safe to wear this device 24 hours a day, all weekend, for 2 days, 48 hours. We recommend that the people do this on Saturday and Sunday, and then they are finally free of any traces of HIV and can be tested and shown clear of it in those final 2 days. And yes, if they still have it in their lymph tissue, they can reinfect. But they can pass the test and join the army or whatever they want to do. So our new protocol, to repeat, is do it 2 hours a day for 21 days. After that, do it 24 hours a day for 2 days. All you have to remember to do is about every 20 minutes, take your little dropper bottle of salt water and put a couple of drops on each electrode. This keeps it wet. The wetter the electrode, the greater the conductivity, the less the resistance. Resistance and conductivity are reciprocal functions. And then all of the healing energy is going into your blood. Now, when you finish that, you're going to feel pretty good. Now, what else has this done? We have a friend here in the third row who knew me several years ago. He can tell you in a test that I've lost 105 pounds with absolutely no change in diet, with no exercise. And I had been trying to do this for 35 years. I'd been a fatty. When I sat down in the coach section of the airline, here would come the stewardess with this little extension seat belt, because the standard one on the airplane wouldn't go around my stomach. I was baldish. I had a fringe of hair around the sides, but I had the male pattern baldness on the top of my head and up each side. You remember me from... And I hadn't done anything. I hadn't been to... Oh, by the way, these come out easily. And you're clean. No pulling out needles, sterilizing wounds. You're doing that in vivo. I had not gone for hair transplants. I had not gone through any of these massage herbs. We got 15 minutes, thank you, etc. All I had done, and this was a tremendous surprise, was hold this coil on my head. And I'd also sprayed the roots of my hair with silver colloid, which presumably had killed off any fungus there, which, according to one theory, an Italian doctor says this is one of the mitigating circumstances for baldness. And lo and behold, my barber said, "My God, Bob, what are you doing?" I hadn't noticed, except casually, that when I brushed or combed my hair, I didn't have a wad of hair that went into broke my heart, but it went into the garbage can. So I regrew my hair. I lost 105 pounds after having been on every diet that came through town. All right, I'll tell you. That's a very good question. She said, "Why do I think I lost the weight?" I really don't know, but an educated guess goes like this. Any of you who have ever been on a diet, or most of you, have found that you might lose a little weight in the beginning, but what happens